Hey everybody, it's Noon here with a guide to industrializing in Victoria 3. Vicky is a great game, and industrializing is a big part of the process, but it can be a bit complicated and tricky. So a few people have said they're not entirely sure, like how to get a country up and running. So I thought that's what I would show you today, and I'm going to start with Persia because they're a pretty big country but they're very undeveloped. So we won't run out of populations to work with, but also I can kind of show you the whole process. And if you're playing somewhere more advanced, like, I don't know, Belgium or whatever, they'll just start further along this process than where we do. So you should be able to just pick it up and run with it. The first, I'll also try to explain everything that I'm clicking, just so I don't rush past anything that it turns out is obvious to me but not obvious to everyone watching. So the first thing I like to do when I get a new country is to go and look at all of the provinces. So I'll just start at one end, go to the buildings, because that's really what we're looking at. And my number one tip for playing Victoria 3 is to change out of this view. There's this little button here, and it turns all of the buildings into this much more readable list. This one is prettier, but you have to scroll through it, and I find it harder to read. So I would strongly recommend using the view list instead of the grid. So here in Tabriz, we have about 350,000 people in need of work. We've got a textile mill, government admin, logging camps, and some like luxury farms, and some barracks. And then a bunch of subsistence farms, which is where the peasants work, basically. So the idea would hopefully to get subsistence farms and peasants down to zero eventually, but that's going to be pretty far off. Okay, so this is actually our largest state, I'm pretty sure. Let's have a look at this next one. We've got a furniture manufactory, about 70,000, 80,000 people, rice, glassworks, that's good that we've got a glassworks, opium. It's a nice thing about Persia is you have a bunch of opium, though that's not going to be super relevant in what we're doing in this video. 100,000 or so, 40,000, almost nothing, just a dye plantation and a barracks. 50,000 and nothing except a wheat farm, fishing wharves, a couple farms, 100k, yeah, similar. And I think this is our capital state, is it? No, Tehran is here. Has a textile mill as well. Nothing here. Okay, and quite a lot of population. So next we're going to have a look at our tech situation, and Persia starts pretty far behind in tech. And in some ways, this is also a guide to your tech research order, because it's very closely tied in with industrialization. So I almost always start with something in the production menu, unless I'm actively in a war at game start, or like I'm about to go to war as soon as possible. And like, honestly, with Persia, that's not a bad idea to just like take mandatory service and conquer Afghanistan or something like that. But we're not going to do that today. Ditto society, it can be useful to, for example, have colonization. The fact that we don't have academia and we can't build universities is definitely bad, so we'll want that. But this is about industrialization, so we're going to take a production tech. So there are sort of two, maybe three industrial revolutions in Victoria. One sort of technically starts with manufactories. It's with tooling workshops. So basically just like rolling out tools to be involved in most of your manufacturing process. And for that you need lathe, which unlocks some production methods that use tools, and mechanical tools, which same thing. The second little revolution is with motor industries that comes with atmospheric engine, and you can roll that out with railways, which lets you build railways, and then water tube boiler and rotary valve engine, which let you burn coal to improve your industry. And then later on, there's electricity and like cars and stuff like that, but we're not going to even remotely talk about that today. So we're going to get started on this first little section, which is the tools. So we're going to take cotton gin, and then lathe, and then mechanical tools. So unless something really weird happens, that's what we're going to research. Oops, where do we get on the map? Okay, next we're going to start building. And normally I like to start with building some construction centers, or as I like to call them, building buildings. Let's put one in Tabriz, which is our population capital. So one construction sector, please. In fact, let's build two. So you notice that we're starting off making about 7,000, oh, yeah, 7,500. We have about 400,000 in the bank, and we are currently, not spending anything on construction because your first construction sector, your first 5 construction capacity is free, and then once you build a construction sector, you start picking up the tab for the buildings. So we're going to stay on wooden buildings for the moment, because we don't have any iron or tools. So those are going to be the next things that we build. So let's get an iron mine and a tooling factory, which, why don't we put that here? Doesn't super matter where you put it, I just like to spread high value industries around. The other thing I like to do at the start is to tax my population really heavily, so either up to high taxes or even very high taxes, and to put a consumption tax on something like services, or maybe opium, or both, which are like essential but not like that essential. So we're now making 18,000, and that's going to go down very rapidly once we finish building this construction sector. I'm not going to be worrying too much about diplomacy. Probably some stuff will come up, and I'll just deal with it quickly. One of the key game design concepts behind this game, according to the dev diaries that Paradox releases, is that warfare should be diplomacy continued by other means. And I think they do a pretty good job of that, but I think what they really managed to do well is to make everything a matter of industry by other means. And by that I mean, like, warfare is just your industry expressed in terms of how many barracks and naval bases you can afford. And, like, everything else is sort of follows from that basic principle. And I think they've done a really neat job of that. But for that reason, if you can learn to industrialize effectively, you can also learn to have a much more effective military presence, because it just works exactly the same as any other building and economy, except it's guys with guns. So yeah, I guess the kind of 3 metrics that I think about in the game are GDP, which is kind of your, and population, which is your industry and economy itself, if you know what I mean. Then by your military, which is basically, as I say, number of troops and number of flotillas. And the third one is standard of living, which is, again, your industry, the quality of your industry expressed through how your population are going. Okay, we're still making a lot of money even with both of these construction sectors up, so I think let's build another one. Let's pop it here. Ideally, we want to be making a small loss rather than a relatively large profit. You can see we're like pretty much maxed on our gold reserves, so I'm even going to turn down taxes just for a moment until this construction sector gets going. And I'm always building construction sectors. I'm alt-clicking to build them first, because then they can help build everything else. This is the worst design part of the game, in my opinion, is access to this menu, which is really important, but hidden behind several mouse overs. So you go to standard of living up here in the toolbar, and then you can mouse over, say, lower strata, but you can also do it with the average for the whole population, or middle or upper, but lower is usually the most relevant one, because they tend to be by far the largest chunk of your population. And then you mouse over the next average cost here, and so they're paying way too much for grain, furniture, clothes, fabric, wood, just everything pretty much. So our goal, as well as industrializing in terms of developing our tech and our military and whatever else, is also going to be to make sure that people are employed so they have an income and that they spend that income efficiently on goods that make them happier. Okay, we've got cotton gin, which is fine. It's actually a reasonably good tech. It's pretty innocuous, the 25% cotton plantations building throughput, but we have a few cotton plantations around the place, I'm pretty sure. Do we? Yeah, well, here's one, for example. So this is going to be making the cost of fabric much lower. Well, at least a bit lower, which is nice. And it leads to lathe. We're just going to take lathe. It's going to be 10 to 16 months, which is great that it's quick. And again, the actual benefits that we get here are fine. We get lathes and leaded glass and dye workshops, these different production methods for these different factories. But basically we're doing it so we can get mechanical tools. And also we need atmospheric engine soon. Okay, we're now making a small loss, which is perfect, but we're on low taxation, so we can actually afford to build some more construction sectors, because again, we want to be making a small loss. And I'm basically, like, you can decide where to put these on whatever basis. One is where it's going to be most cost efficient, another would be where there's a lot of population. So maybe we could put one in, whatever, yeah, Isfahan, that sounds good. So I've queued up two more at the top here. So we discovered that grain is one of the things that people are struggling with, so let's build some wheat farms. Maybe we can put two in. And what else are they short on? Furniture, fabric, clothes. Fabric is pretty expensive, so we could build a livestock ranch, which makes fabric. Okay, we're having some input goods shortages of wood. So we actually need to build logging camps pretty urgently, so I'm going to queue two of those at the top, even before this tooling workshop. Or maybe let's do one and then the tooling workshop. Okay, and now we're making a decent amount of a loss, and we can turn taxes back up, and there's a tiny little bit of profit, something like that. Losing 5k out of a gold reserve of 800k is like pretty good. It's like, you know, a couple of percent, something like that, if my completely ill-considered maths is right. Okay, so this is a very common event that appears. This isn't the point of this guide, but basically you can choose to radicalize lower strata pops, upper strata pops, or middle strata pops in exchange for benefits for the industrialists, the trade unions, and rural folk. I almost always choose the one that buffs the trade unions and radicalizes the upper strata pops, because upper strata pops are almost always a really small sector of your population, even though they do have a disproportionate amount of political influence. But yeah, I like to radicalize the upper strata pops, who tend to be happy, and buff the trade unions, who are insignificant at game start. I'll probably just cut out the rest of the events that appear during this video, unless there's one that's super relevant to our economy, and some of them are. Okay, so the other thing about this game, and a lot of Paradox interactive games, is that they have this situation log, and it tells you what you need to be doing, if you know what all of the issues are. And these ones are all fairly straightforward. So we've got expensive government goods, wood and fabric. Fair enough, because they're used in our construction methods. So we're dealing with that by building logging camps and livestock ranches, so that's fine. Expensive military goods, artillery. A big part of the game is making lines go up and down. And knowing how supply and demand works is very useful, but it's all explained pretty straightforwardly on this graph, on this menu. So we're currently trying to sell 17.5 artilleries, and we're currently trying to buy 24 artilleries. So there's not enough, which means there's not enough supply and too much demand, which means the price is too expensive. And the opposite can also be true, which causes issues. So we can just set up a import route, except no one wants to export artillery to us, so that's unfortunate. We could also take our barracks off cannon artillery, and I think that might be a good idea, just for the near future. We're not planning on going to war. We're going to downgrade our barracks. It is going to make us like weak and vulnerable, but I don't think anyone's going to be making super aggressive moves on us anytime soon. Okay, and now the trade route that we had importing artillery is now worthless because we're not using any artillery, so we can stop doing that. Here we have insufficient taxation capacity, which is a constant issue throughout a lot of the game and a lot of nations. You can see it here in the overview screen. We're using 177 out of 140, so we have a deficit. You produce it here in your government administration building. And we can upgrade the production method, which is going to cost us some money, and it's going to make paper more expensive, but it will give us more taxation capacity. So let's do that. It should help a little bit, except paper is very expensive. So we can go to the paper market screen. We can see because of that the price has shot up. We're not producing any, but we are now buying a bunch. So we can try and import some from Russia. Great. And we could also build a paper mill, which I think is a good idea. Why don't we put one here? Okay, let's have a look at this iron mine. It's got a problem. Tools are very expensive, which it needs to make iron, and iron is very cheap. So let's turn one of our construction sectors onto the next production method, which will ruin our economy for just a moment while we sort everything out. We are now building more, yeah, and now we're making more of a loss than we were just before, which is fine. So where's our tooling workshop? It's here. It hasn't finished being built yet. It's 3 weeks away. That's fine. And we're actually going to set it to start off on pig iron tools. There's this kind of feedback loop between iron and tools, where you need iron to make tools, you make tools to make iron. So we might, if this doesn't work out, if the tooling workshop doesn't end up hiring enough people, or yeah, it's sort of having a bit of a struggle here, we can actually turn it on to crude tools for a minute. This way it'll be cheaper for them to manufacture tools, right? Because the input costs have gone down, so the price of tools goes down, so the iron mines can afford to buy more tools. Hopefully that should happen as the tooling workshop starts employing more people. Yep. So we can see the price of tools is like wobbling and dropping. Okay, we've unlocked lathe. I'll just set it to the next one I already talked about. We want mechanical tools, so let's just do that. And let's keep watching this little feedback loop happening with the iron mines and the price of tools. So where are we building them? Here. Wood is still quite expensive, but we have just built another logging camp, I'm pretty sure. So here we're seeing that they're trying to hire more people. There we go. So now tools are getting cheaper again, which means the iron mines should be more productive again. Iron's still very expensive, so let's actually, we can put an export tariff on. So again, this is just a basic sort of consequence of how supply and demand works. But a tariff is a tax on an export or import, and if you make exporting more expensive, it becomes more profitable to sell in the domestic market. So that's why this is called protect domestic supply. So this means that your population are more likely to sell whatever this good is, in this case iron, to your internal market rather than exporting it. In this case, it's not actually going to make any difference whatsoever because we're only selling internally, but it's a good idea if you're short on something to just hit that tariff button if you have it unlocked in your country. And we're going to set up an import route from Russia, so that's great. Okay, we've got paper input shortages, so let's see if we can get any more. No, we can't, but we're building a paper mill, so that should help. Yeah, so in some sense, industrializing is the process of clearing out this current situation menu, right? Like it's saying build iron mines, build logging camps, get more fabric and more paper. And so you're like, okay, well, in that case, I need to build more logging camps or make my logging camps more efficient So we could switch over to sawmills and start using tools here, which should also make the tooling workshop more profitable, right? Because the price of tools is going up, so however much they sell them for is worth more, plus the input goods are going down. And I think at this stage we can switch to pig iron tools, which is actually making tools extremely cheap, and we can expand our iron mine some more. We also need more logging camps, so I'm just going to build this last two here. Okay, fabric has gone off the expensive government goods because we built that livestock ranch. And so this is kind of what I was talking about. The process of industrializing is the process of like rolling out tools into your production. So that's what we've been doing, right? First, we got the tech that lets us upgrade our production methods. Then we got our tooling workshop running, and we made sure it was profitable. And we actually did that by turning down the production method tech, so that we could make tools cheap enough that we could buy them somewhere else, right? And so we're manipulating, in some sense, where the goal is just to manipulate the price of tools so that it's both profitable to buy them and profitable to sell them. Okay, we unlocked stock exchange. This is actually very useful. There's a bunch of... Oh, and paddle steamer, which is also very useful. That plus 10% convoys means that we can get more trade routes without building more buildings. We're now working our way through our gold reserves pretty significantly. We've spent like 500k of our savings, right, since the game started. That's totally fine. We've still got a lot in the bank. We're still on medium taxes, and we haven't quite... So I prefer to get all of my construction sectors working at the next level before building more of them. I'm not sure that's necessarily a great strategy, but I don't think it's terrible. So yeah, that's kind of my default. So here, although I think we could turn up taxes and build another construction sector or two, I think that would probably end up putting us too far in a deficit. So I'm just going to try and make iron cheap enough. Oh, there we go. Iron is now cheap. Paper is now cheap. That's great. This is actually something I find a little misleading about the game that I think might be useful for new players. Is when a trade route is unproductive, it's usually good to get rid of it because it saves you bureaucracy and it makes your domestic markets more efficient and a whole lot of other stuff. Saves you convoys. But when it's minus 0.1, that's actually not very unproductive at all. It's almost free, right? Like it's almost zero. And that means it's almost profitable. And so if we just let this play for a bit, we see that it's actually dropped down significantly. So now I'm probably going to get rid of it, but it might just disappear from this list. We've just built more iron mines, so it makes sense that our iron import routes are less efficient. And this way, it also means that there's less competition with our iron mines, so their profits are going to increase because they're selling more iron. Cool. We still need more iron and more wood. Is there anywhere else that we can get imports from? No, we're profitable. It's fine. Do we have anywhere else that can build iron mines? No, I don't think so. Is this one? No. Okay, so next we're going to try and build some coal mines. Let's do this one. What's it called? Mazandaran. We're just going to build one. It's going to start off being not very profitable because we don't have any use for coal at the moment. Mechanical tools, do any of these use coal? No, I think atmospheric engine is where we start being able to use coal. So maybe we could have researched this first, or we could put our coal mine a little further down the list, actually. That's probably a good idea. So let's just keep building iron mines. What the hell? We're going to need them. And we'll put them before the coal mine, just because we want to line up the coal mine with about when atmospheric engine finishes researching so that we can build all of these engine pumps. The other thing we could do is build a steel mill. That's not a bad idea. We could build a steel mill, and that way we'll have a way for our coal to be profitable. So let's pop our steel mill here. It's really useful to look at this little tooltip. about how much it's predicted to earn a week. In this case, you don't have to actually worry about it because we know it's going to be unprofitable at the moment, but once we start building coal and using the steel elsewhere, it's going to be valuable. Okay, so we've got mechanical tools. That's great. We can upgrade our paper mills and furniture manufactories and tooling workshops, though we don't have steel yet. But yeah, there's a bunch of good stuff here. Next is atmospheric engine, 35 months. You may notice I'm not building a whole lot in these provinces. That's because Persia only has very limited coastline, and I want to build a bunch of ports and naval bases here, which isn't really pertinent to the point of this guide, but let's pop in a port or two just for, verisimilitude. They are useful and important. Also useful and important is food industries, and you can see here that tooltip I was saying it's going to be plus 0.79 predicted a week, so it's worth building. Let's pop one in. We can also have a look at standard of living again. What are people spending money on? Grain, opium, probably partly because of our taxes, fabric, wood, furniture, clothes, services, all the usual stuff. Actually, that's another thing that we can spend coal on, is we can set up gas streetlights in our urban centers, and that's actually probably a really good idea. So as soon as this coal mine finishes building, I will switch over Tabriz urban center to be producing with coal, and that'll make the coal more profitable, and it'll make the services cheaper, so it's good for everyone. Okay, we are now making a small profit, and I think that's because we just finished building some iron mines, and so our expenses have dropped dramatically, which means we can make our expenses go up dramatically again by switching everything over to iron frame construction. And there you go, we're making a huge loss again. So what are we spending it on? Iron and tools. Okay, Afghanistan wants to enter a trade relationship with us. I'm going to say no, just for the moment. Again, I'm trying to focus on industrializing our country, which means I want to simplify how the economy is running, including not getting random small nations that also need iron and tools in our market. Okay, so we can now profitably import iron again. We've got another iron mine being built. We can't upgrade this production method yet. We need the tech here. Atmospheric engine. Again, I'm just basically ignoring the political movements and laws. I haven't changed anything. One thing that's worth noting is that interventionism and laissez-faire are basically far and away the two best laws, and that's because of the investment pool contribution. By the time you can unlock laissez-faire, which should be in 30 years or something like that, you'll have a lot more capitalists, and it becomes really profitable. The main reason you might prefer interventionism, or two reasons. One is that you have a lot of aristocrats, or that you want to build agriculture. But laissez-faire will not fund agriculture, so you kind of want to do it later in the game when you're building a lot of urban factories, though we're building urban factories now. I haven't really talked about the investment pool because ours has been basically empty the whole time, but technically we're actually getting 642 a month. Oh, we're losing money. I need to turn taxes up. There we go. That's better. We're actually still losing probably slightly too much, just because we're now in debt already, so I might turn one of these back down to wooden buildings. There we go, and we can just pay off this little bit of debt. It's fine to be in more debt than this, especially when your credit max is big and growing, which grows relative to your GDP, I'm pretty sure. And also there's some tech that does it. So it can be having this much debt and losing a small amount is where I normally aim to be, but in the early game you want to be a little bit more conservative with it, especially if you're not confident or you're worried about going bankrupt or whatever. But yeah, this is nice, small amount of debt, very tiny profit. That means we've got a pretty good expenditure going on. Okay, so we've just finished building this coal mine, and you can see in the monthly price report down here that the price of coal is absolutely minimal. So that coal mine's not going to be making any money. Where is it? Here. Yeah, it's not making any money, or it's not making much money, and it's got a lot of vacancies because the price of coal is nothing. So it's basically producing worthless dirt. So if we turn this urban center over to gas streetlights, it's going to make the demand for coal skyrocket, and so will the price. So if we look here, there's the skyrocket, and now the factory should produce more. Yep. So the price comes down, and it's going to bounce around and find some equilibrium. I'm also going to turn on the export tariffs, just because everyone wants coal pretty soon into the game, and we'd rather just like protect our supply now. That's fine. We should have just had that steel mill built. Where did we put that? Here we go. Okay, so it's having issues because steel is very... it's not being used by anyone, so it's got no market, and because the input good of iron is expensive. So let's build... what the hell? Let's build 5 more iron mines. Tools are a little bit expensive, so we could try and make our tooling center more efficient. We can turn up to steel tools. That's what we're planning on doing, isn't it? So let's do that. Let's have a look at our steel mill. Price of steel should shoot up, which should make it produce more and hire more, and then they'll make more steel, and then it'll be cheaper for the tools to make steel tools, and then everyone else will have cheaper tools. Yeah, you know, it's a beautiful positive spiral, and I find it extremely satisfying, and that's why I think this game is so cool, but it's also not necessarily super intuitive, so I think that's kind of the point I'm trying to make with this video, is like, this is what the whole game is, right? Is finding which part of your supply chain isn't working, trying to find a piece that you can like Jenga out and make more efficient, that isn't going to make everything collapse. And then what to do if it does collapse, like we saw with this one. What we ended up doing was we turned down the production method, restarted the whole economy with some like affordable tools, and then started producing tools so we can kind of bootstrap our way up. Okay, so the steel mill is not doing fabulously. It's managing to pay its staff and like slightly expand, but iron is still very expensive. But we've got these 5 iron mines queued up. Another really handy menu when you're thinking about industrializing is this one. It just provides the same information as the like expensive government goods tab, but less automated, so you can see the actual breakdown of your construction goods. So like 2/3 of it, or yeah, something like that, is iron. So iron is the main thing that we would want to make cheaper. And here we can see an iron mine has just been built, and the price of iron is going down. And so we're seeing this little dip here. It's kind of meditative, really. And that little dip is equal to like 3 grand of profit or something like that. Okay, we got this mandatory service, which is, you know, nice, but military and not super relevant to us. Got this unproductive trade route reminder about this iron. So here we can see again, it's bouncing around like -1, -2, at which point I might consider keeping it, because you're kind of subsidizing your whole economy by making sure that iron is readily available. But at this stage, -5, I think we can get rid of it. And yeah, -8. Whatever. The worst case scenario is you get rid of it and then you can reestablish it again. It's not the end of the world. This trade route screen is quite useful because of this import and export demand. Again, this is kind of an amalgamation of a few things that I've said. There's the standard of living, right? So these grain, clothes, furniture, these are all like standard of living needs. That there's import demand from your population. And then wood and iron, that's largely from our industry. And so those things are kind of like, yeah, intermingled here in this import demand screen, so that's quite useful on that level. You can see our standard of living has actually dropped quite considerably, so it's probably worth trying to do something about that. One thing we can do is turn down taxes, and that's going to help everyone quite considerably. We're still making our tiny profit while building, so that's great. I think we can just leave it there, and let's see how this affects the standard of living situation. standard of living can be a little slow to come in. Let's also actually do some of those imports that we were just talking about. So grain import. It's useful to sort by productivity. So this is how it's going to affect your national revenue, which isn't necessarily what you want, but it is part of what you want. The other things to look for are amount. So especially for these things like grain, which we basically need an unlimited supply of grain. Big number good in amount. And the convoys is really essential. So we've got 88 convoys, which is not very many. I don't want to use essentially all of them on this. We can get 70 grain with no convoys and make a profit on both of those. And that will be good for our population. It does cost us bureaucracy, but it doesn't cost us convoys. And that's already reduced the demand for grain pretty significantly, as you can see by it being further to the right here. Also do... sorry, I said I would explain everything without just clicking through. Here we're making 0.15. In the same way that a loss of 0.15 is like almost a profit, a profit of 0.15 is like almost a loss. And 15 clothes isn't going to make a difference in a market of like 4 million or whatever. So I think we're just going to leave this. We'll find a more profitable way to do that. Wood, sure, let's get this let's get all of these. They're all pretty profitable and no convoys and significant amounts, at least all up. We're now running pretty low on bureaucracy. We're positive, which is good. I think we'll just leave it there with the import-export situation. Something else to take note of is this. Market access, 99%. That's bad. You want all of them, 100 all the time. So it also shows up in the situation log. Market access in Isfahan is at 99%. It also has a mouse over here if you need to know what market access is. And I strongly encourage you to actually read all of the tooltips that you can force yourself to read. So market access is a measure of how well connected a state is to the rest of its market. It starts at 100 and is reduced whenever the infrastructure usage goes above its infrastructure. It affects a whole bunch of stuff. So overview, we see here infrastructure, 21 of 20. You can build infrastructure with railways and with ports. Unfortunately, we can't do anything here because we don't have railways yet. So we're kind of stuffed here. Not really. One thing you can do is put in a decree. And these decrees are really useful, and I don't utilize them enough, but they're very valuable. And there's this one, plus 25% infrastructure. So let's just pop that on Isfahan, and that'll deal with that. The reason this is so important is that Isfahan is making all of our iron, and if it can't get stuff in and out on, good roads or rail or whatever infrastructure, then the rest of the country doesn't have access to iron, and that's bad. Okay, we're now making a pretty decent profit. Oh, but we're not using all of our construction. Okay, but we're going to switch to iron frame for everything, because I think we're making enough iron now. And we're going to start working on some of these standard of living things. So let's put in a wheat farm, another furniture manufacturer here. Let's get another tooling workshop. That's just industry, not standard of living. That's fine. Another textile mill. We've got this food industries here. Let's make another one of those. Wheat farm. And let's do a glassworks as well. Glass is really valuable. A lot of your population use it, and so do you when you get to the next construction level. Steel frame uses glass. This is a really good economic situation here, where we've got like a tiny reserve of gold and an even tinier loss. Like, having a small loss is better than having a small profit most of the time. Which can be counterintuitive, especially coming from a bunch of other strategy games, but I assure you it's the case. Okay, steel is like moving around how profitable it is, but it will be more profitable soon. Let's also pop in a lead mine. We're not using lead yet, but we will soon. Okay, great. And we've got atmospheric engine. So this also kind of is the beginning of the second industrial revolution for Vicky with the motor industries. We've kind of already done it with tools, right? Like our construction sector is now using tools. All of our mines can now be built and they use tools. And so we've kind of completed that first leg of it, and the next one is now motor industries. So I'll maybe I'll pop a second video which will be about industrializing with motor industries, because this one is already running fairly long. But I hope this has given you some ideas about how to industrialize and play the first couple of years of Victoria as a deindustrialized nation.